Jason, though, we have this staff. Okay. I need to use the restroom to be right back. What's up? Yeah, why? Okay. Fresh? Browser? Yeah, let me go into hold on. Let me look in Vimeo. Nope. It's working. Okay. Blocking things. All right.
right, good morning and hello, everybody. We're just getting warmed up and testing everything out right before the show starts. We're going to be starting in, I think it's about 5 minutes left on the counter. But I wanted to say hello, welcome everybody. If you're here with us live, which obviously you are, say hello wherever you're at. If you have a Pro Pass, make sure that you join us in the Expo Hall right now. There's a bunch of people in there running around having some fun conversations. And everybody else, just get ready. We're going to have a lot of fun. There's a lot of cool stuff coming up today, and I'm really excited. So we're going to finish testing up, make sure everything is good, and we'll be starting in just a moment.
Hey, welcome everyone to Game Dev Guild Day 1, the second annual online event dedicated 100% to game development. Really excited to have you all here. So I'm Joe. I'll be running things behind the scenes, but I just want to hop on really quick to introduce Jason, our host for the whole event. You probably know him from his YouTube channel and all his courses. So really excited to have him as the host of Game Dev Guild. So Jason, we're about to go live, and then we'll see, it's the opening kind of welcome kind of keynote that we're going to have right now, and then we'll jump into our speakers. You should see all the speakers and the times that they're going to be speaking down below this video. And we're going to go over some housekeeping as well, how to ask questions to speakers, how to chat among ourselves in the community, and things like that. So I'm also going to be monitoring the Discord channel and GatherTown. So if you have any technical issues with the stream or anything, just hit me up and let me know. All right, Jason, I'm about to bring you in, and let's do this. Welcome, Jason, to day one of Game Dev Guild.
Welcome, and thanks everybody for coming. I'm really excited to have everybody here for day one of Game Dev Guild. We've got a lot of people already showing up, and I wanted to say welcome to all the pro people, the students, and everybody who's here with the one-day pass. Before we get started, there's a bunch of housekeeping. Joe kind of mentioned that we've got a lot of things to talk about. Before we get into the sessions, I want to make sure that everything goes as smooth as possible. So let's just run through them as quick as we can, make sure that we get as much detail though. So first off, for the community section stuff, there's a lot of people already set up in the virtual expo hall in Gather. If you have a pro pass, make sure that you come join us there. You can see Andreas and Joe are down in the speaker room, but we run around. Let's go take a look up here. Joe, you want to follow me up here? See what the expo hall looks like? He's moving up here. But we've got tons of people up here in the expo hall starting to have some interesting conversations, and the sponsors are starting to appear at their booths. I can see Brian over at the Ceremonies booth, and it looks like the Unity people are here. There's Philip and Cal right next to me. So I wanted to say, come in here, make sure that you're in here, run around, join us, have it in another tab while the whole all the sessions are going on. I expect to see conversations going on while we're doing that. Outside of that, we've also got the Discord server open. If you've got a student pass, make sure that you jump in there. You have any technical issues and you can't find support somewhere else, Discord is another good option. The other great support option, though, is to just go to GameDevGuild.com/contact. If you have a problem, just submit it right there. Andreas is watching and quickly responding to all of the problems. You have an issue getting in, you have an issue trying to ask a question, or anything else, just hop over there, submit a question, or submit a support ticket to him, and we'll get it fixed right away. The other thing on questions that I wanted to mention is at the top of this page, if you're not watching on the YouTube stream, but if you're just watching on the one-day pass or the actual pro pass or student pass page, there's a Slido section off to the right. You can use that to ask questions throughout the session. Just submit your questions, and then we'll go through them during the Q&A part of the session. So after we've seen all of the interesting topic or whatever the topic is and seen all of the details on it, we'll go into Q&As. But the questions you can submit long before, while the talk is going on, while they kind of pop into your head. And then we'll present them and go over them with the speaker and get hopefully some really good answers to that. And then while you're over there on that Slido tab, there's also a poll section. So at the end of each section, we want to try to make sure that the talks are good and that they're kind of really targeted at what you want. I mean, the whole goal here is that the talks are very targeted at you specifically as developers and are things that you can actually use and that you find really valuable. So at the end of it, the poll is really simple. You just got to rate it basically like 1 to 5 on your smiley faces on how much it applied to you and how good it was. So please vote on all of those at the end of them. I want to know which ones are really good. So that way when we do next year's conference, we know which topics to focus on and which ones people were less interested in. Hopefully all of them are five smiley faces, but we'll see. All right. Next, we've got this is something that I'm not too worried about, but it is an online event, and I'm still supposed to mention that there is a code of ethics, which is just kind of be nice to each other. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but if anybody does have an issue, just message Andreas or somebody else, and we'll try to help. But honestly, I don't expect that to be a problem. Everybody here is pretty awesome. All right, next, speaking of awesome people, I wanted to thank our awesome sponsors. So can we switch to a view showing the expo hall again? So down in the expo hall, all of our sponsors have a booth, and our sponsors are, a lot of them throughout the conference, going to be there just hanging out at the booth to answer questions, talk about what they've got to offer, and will really just give you kind of one-on-one direct feedback and direct contact with these people. So I see Brian's there at the Ceremonies booth. I think I mentioned earlier the Unity booth's got a few people, and I expect all of the sponsors will be in and out of the booths throughout the conference. So make sure that you hop in, go talk to them, say hello. And if you have questions, now is a perfect time. You're going to be able to ask people questions one-on-one where they're not distracted, and you've actually got them kind of right there, kind of locked into their booth, and they can't really get away unless they, I guess, AFK. But just don't let them. All right. So first, let's go over this, or not first, but next, I want to go over and thank the actual individual sponsors. We've got Backtrace, who really was the platinum sponsor and made this entire event possible. You can see their booth in the bottom left, or the front left of the expo hall. And they have an awesome debugging platform that automates all of your error capture, has a really cool web console to make it simple. They basically have built as a service tools that used to be an entire team at companies that I work at. I worked on tools like this at companies, and it's a big giant product. They've productized it into something that now everybody can use, and it's extremely cool. I've actually done a full dedicated video on Backtrace, and I'm going to send that out in an email to everybody that's attended the conference, so you can go check it out. And also, we've got Mac Clark speaking later on today from Backtrace, and you're going to give some really good details on how you can. I don't want to spoil it, but it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to show you how you can use this stuff to prevent having problems in your actual production environments, which is something that most people don't realize it can be as easy as it is. So make sure that you check out their booth, and make sure that you come check out Max Talk. Next, we've got our gold sponsors. First is Unity. They make a video game engine. You've probably heard. Now, I'm sure everybody here knows what Unity is. They said they've got two booths up there. There's actually one for Unity and another for Unity's gaming services. They've got a lot going on with gaming services side. So they've got a whole separate booth to just ask questions and talk about that side specifically. The other gold sponsor is GameDriver. If you haven't seen GameDriver, then you've been missing out, because it's the perfect way to automate all of your testing. This is something that, it's odd. It's another one of the tools that in a game company I tried to build. I built a small portion of something like this for some of the MMOs I worked on, trying to automate the testing environment. And if you've ever tried to automate testing with games, you know it's extremely hard. GameDriver makes it very easy. Just we'll talk a lot more about GameDriver later on. I don't want to spoil the whole thing, but you get to record tests, play them back at different speeds, have all kinds of very cool systems to automate that. And it's way more powerful than just simple unit testing. All right. We've got, let's see. Oh, going through my notes here. Oh, sorry, I lost track for a second there on my notes. The last sponsor that I wanted to make sure to thank is Ceremonies. Can we go back to Gather for just 1 second? Because I know that Brian was already hanging out at the Ceremonies booth. And last year, that booth was very popular. It's a great place where if you're interested in editor tooling at all, or custom editor stuff for Unity, then the Ceremonies booth had tons of conversations about that last year. I expect it to be about the same this year. Lots of really fun talks. So make sure that you go check them out, and also go check out the Odin Inspector license. If you got the Pro Pass, you got the 1 year free Odin Inspector. Make sure that you go install that and try it out throughout the conference, and go ask them questions about it if you have any while the conference is going on and while you've got them there. All right. So for everybody who's watching on YouTube, make sure that you go check out the free 1-day pass. We're streaming the first 2 sessions, or the first 2 hours, to YouTube, but there's a free 1-day pass that's available in the description down below. Just click on it, it'll pop up to see the stream, and you'll actually be able to ask questions in the Slido deck as well. So make sure that you go check that out. And then everybody who's here for the free 1-day pass, sure if you're interested in coming to the next 4 days, you can go grab one of the passes down below. There's the student pass, or we have the pro pass that includes access to the expo hall and a couple $1,000s worth of bonuses and a bunch of other cool stuff that you can get right away. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you just check out the link down below and come join us for the rest of the conference. Otherwise, at least come join us for the single first day and come check out all of the talks. We got a lot of really cool stuff today. All right, so do we have anything else? I think that, no, I've got to go on. Oh, no, I wanted to go on to the conference talks. That's right. So today we've got a large set of kind of big name people talking. And then tomorrow we've got an even bigger one. And then it just keeps going and going and going. So we're going to go through the entire schedule real quick. I just wanted to call off all of the different talks that we're going to have and the different speakers. So everybody has a quick overview of what the schedule looks like and what we're going to be talking about. It's all game dev related stuff, design, code, testing it, and everything else. So today, the first session after me, of course, is going to be Thomas Brush. He's going to be talking about, well, the title is Design a Game Like a Pro, which is kind of exactly what he's done. And it's going to be focused, I believe, somewhat heavily on the level side of it, but just on game design in general. If you haven't seen Thomas before, he's got a YouTube channel with a couple 100,000 subscribers. He's built a bunch of video games that he's released and talked about, and he's building one. I think he was building two and he's doing a lot of things that I'm not sure which things he has actually talked about publicly. So I don't know how many of them I can spoil, but he's doing a lot of stuff and he's built a ton of games. And he's also an amazing artist. He's one of those people that can build a game, write the code, and do the art, which is one of the things I've always envied. I'm a terrible, terrible artist. So that's coming up first, getting right into game design. Next up, we've got Next up, we've got Lana Lex, who's going to be working on talking about working on large solo games. So she's been building her own game. It's like a RPG, I guess like sci-fi, futuristic. It's hard to, I don't know, I'm losing the correct word for it, but it's a really cool single player RPG that she's been building on Twitch the entire time. So she's been live streaming the entire process, building out the art and building out the entire story, the design, and all of the code, and showing that entire process on stream. So it's really cool. And the topic, I think, really makes sense. It's working on large games solo and wearing all the hats. So she's going to be talking about the process of basically building a big game all on your own, which not many people do. You've probably seen a couple games that were like a solo developer built it. It's very, very rare that a solo developer actually builds and finishes everything and doesn't end up bringing in like 3, 4, 5 different people to build stuff. So it's really cool. I'm excited to see what this process is like and what the workflow is specifically, how to get around getting all of that stuff done with a single developer. Next, we've got Russell talking about the power of Unity's gaming services. So we've been talking about UGS and them having a separate booth. It's because they've got a lot going on. The new netcode stuff has just released. Netcode for entities is, I'm not sure what the state is now. I've lost track in my head, but it's out. I've seen demos of it and it's running great and doing some really cool stuff. And then they've also released a bunch of new services that I saw at GDC that I think people would be excited to know about, like the user-generated content thing. I didn't even know that they were building that. And there's an entire user-generated content system that you can just put into your game to allow users to build stuff, upload it to the web, and then put that out to other players, kind of building out a marketplace in your game. That's going to be really fun. After that, we've got Justin talking about getting started with VR in Unity, which I'm really excited about because my son just got a new Valve Index. And it's been a little while since I dove into VR stuff. And the Index is really cool. I felt like it would be a perfect time to go steal his Index and start playing around with the headset and diving back into VR. I know things have changed quite a bit since I started doing VR, or since I stopped doing VR stuff, whatever, 4 years ago or so. So it's going to be interesting to see what that process is like. I assume it's going to be nice and simple, and he's going to show us all of the cool tricks for doing it easily, doing it quickly, and not running into problems. After that, I mentioned before, we've got Mac talking about the secret ingredient to gaming DevOps, which I think is going to it's going to be useful for anybody who's got a game that they're actually releasing. If you've got a game that you're putting out and you want to get it out in front of people on different systems where it's not just on your test environment, and you want to see that it's actually working, find the problems and find them before the users do, or really in this case, before the players do, then this is exactly the kind of thing you need. It's very easy to set up. It's pretty simple to get started. And there's really not a lot of reason not to have something like this. Again, if you're releasing a game, you make sure that you come to that talk and go check out their booth. After that, we've got the final talk of the day, which I'm very excited for. This is Dan's talk on game architecture. It's titled Game Architecture Go Big. I've only seen a tiny little sneak preview of it. I didn't want to spoil it because I think this is going to be one of the ones that for me is the most exciting. I just like watching Dan's talks. So Dan did a session last year. It was really, really cool. And I wanted to see another one this year on game architecture specifically. He's got a whole, I'll let him tell you about the books and everything, but it's very cool. And I'm super excited about that. All right. I think I'm going to take a drink and then we'll go on to day 2, because day 2, we've got something really exciting. It's nice having a stage where I can just grab a rock star and be sitting down. All right, so day 2. We're starting off with my buddy Chris, who's going to be talking about unit testing. I say my buddy Chris, but Chris is an amazing speaker. He's not speaking just because he's my buddy. He's speaking because he's one of the best speakers I know, especially on the topic of unit testing. And he's going to be talking about unit testing in Unity without the humble object pattern. So if you've ever looked into or tried doing unit testing in Unity, you may have run into the problem of having to basically implement or follow the humble object pattern to make it easy to do testing. And this talk is around not doing that. So I'm kind of curious what the difference is, what it's going to be. I haven't watched this one yet. I don't know what the details are, but I want to see if it's going to be my guess is that Chris has found a nice, easy way to do unit testing in games in Unity without having to change your workflow too much. So I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a great kind of start to day 2. But right after that is probably the most exciting part, where I get to interview John Riccitiello. So he's the CEO of Unity, and I've got, I think it was 7. I've lost track of my questions. I think I've got 7 questions that I'm going to ask him, and then if we get more time, we'll see if we can ask him some more. So if you've got questions, make sure that you show up for that one, submit them, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited for that. John's also just a really interesting person. If you've ever seen him talk and seen him given a speech anywhere or just a Q&A or any of those things, it's always it's interesting and engaging watching him talk. He's a very good speaker, and he has very interesting stories. He's done a lot of really cool things, so he's been there through a lot of the really interesting stuff and has a lot of cool stuff to share. So I'm really excited about that, and also not just for that part, but also excited to find out more stuff about what the plans are for Unity, short term and long term. So it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, next we've got Cedric talking about accelerating Unity game development cycles. And this is around workflow and development. And this is, I'm not sure exactly what this one's going to be like. I expect it to be somewhat similar to talk 3 of today, where we're talking about workflow and improving your actual process for building out games. So I'm curious to see what it is. I try not to pre-watch all of the sessions content stuff because I like to be excited and kind of have it be new to me and I want to watch it when you're all watching it. So I haven't seen it all, but that one, it seemed like a really interesting topic. Although the topic right after that is the one that I'm probably the most into right now, which is AI. And Corvallis is going to be talking about AI integrations with Unity and virtual production. I don't know what the virtual production part is. I have a loose idea of what the Unity part is. And I do know what the AI is, though. So I'm really excited about this. He was actually at the Premixer show. We did a roundtable on AI and had a lot of really interesting thoughts on AI stuff and seems to really know stuff. So I'm excited for that one and see what kind of Unity AI stuff. There's a lot of AI stuff coming too. More of that on day 3. Johnny next. Johnny Thompson, Johnny Turbo. I'm sure most of you have all seen him. If you've done anything with DOTS, the data-oriented tech stack, Johnny is kind of the guy, or at least he's my guy for all the DOTS stuff. And he's doing a talk on modular data-oriented design. So I thought this was going to be interesting. It's not just not so much ECS and DOTS, but more on the data structures and the way that you set all of that up. I think it's going to be an interesting topic on something that people don't really dive too much into. Usually the DOTS content is more on like on the specific methods and implementations, and not so much on the data design. So this is going to be really cool. And the way Johnny explained it, it sounded really exciting. Next, we've got multiplayer tools from Esteban, which is going to be more awesome Unity stuff. They dive into Unity's multiplayer networking setup and some of the latest stuff from there. If you haven't seen it yet, it's kind of the perfect time to get exposed. Go check out Unity's new multiplayer stuff. I actually plan on doing a lot of stuff with Unity's netcode for game objects, and get my words out right, sometime in July. I think it's a really cool system, and it's seems very matured now. It's kind of built up and it's handling a lot of stuff. I also really want to dig into the netcode for entities too, though. So let's keep going though. Next, we got Joshua talking about how you're no longer the smartest person in the room. This is about Open GPT and game development. For me, any of this GPT stuff in game dev it's exciting to me. I think that things are changing drastically, and I know a lot of people disagree with me, but I heavily think that AI is going to change the way that people write code and the way that game developers work. And I think that I want to see what Joshua has to say about that and what we can do to take advantage of that. Because I think it's very important to start taking advantage of that. And on AI, we've got day 3. So day 3, which is going to be Wednesday. Okay, well, it's Wednesday for me. It's May the 3rd. We've got times right here, 10 a.m. Eastern is the start. So we've got our first 2 talks are on AI. We've got utilizing generative AI for Unity, which is going to be interesting. I think that that's probably one of the first places that AI is going to make a big difference for game development, is when you start, and it kind of already is, generating 2D images right now. People are generating a lot of sprite sets and starting to generate 3D stuff. And pretty soon they'll be generating 3D worlds, models. I mean, people already do some generative 3D stuff now, but I think that it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and start to take over. So if you're not already up to date on that stuff, make sure that you watch, because I'm going to be watching and seeing what kind of stuff I can pick up from it. The next one is Nick's talk, and this is making modular AI with utility systems. Now, if I remember right, and I'm not mixing myself up, this is actually the other kind of AI. This is the other kind of AI that a lot of game developers are talking about and interested in. That is not the, why can't I get my words? The GPT style stuff. So this is going to be making modular AI with utility systems. I haven't seen this talk either, but it was on AI and game development. That's not the GPT-ish stuff. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting to get into there. Speaking of, I've been using a couple behavior tree packs from the asset store recently in the last week or two, just kind of in my little bit of spare time. Been having a lot of fun with them, and I want to do something about those sometime soon. Sorry, just a little distraction, but this AI stuff made me think about it. So next we've got Jay coming back to talk about making your sound dynamic. This is, I think, the only talk that we have on game audio, but I want to make sure that we have something on game audio because it's one of those topics that a lot of people just kind of forget about, don't really remember to put in there, and it makes a huge difference. We actually did a stream yesterday reviewing Game Jam games, and the one that won, the one that got first place, and get my words out a little bit smoother, was actually the only game that had audio in it. It had voiceover. It wasn't the only game. It was the game that had by far the best audio. It had voiceovers, it had sound effects, it had music, and it had kind of all of the audio put together. And that added a lot of points to the rating, but it also, I think, brought people in a lot. And it's something that people forget about, and it's not that difficult if you know how to do it right. So make sure you join us for Jay's talk. And that's in the middle of the afternoon on on day 3. And after that, we're going to have a little bit more networking time. So on Wednesday, we're going to have a bit of networking time in the expo hall for people to go run around. I mean, you can run around and network throughout the entire conference and stuff before and after the sessions and even after the conference at the end of the day. But we're going to have a couple of times throughout the day, at least once each day, for a little bit of dedicated networking time to just run around, go chat while you eat your lunch or whatever other stuff you want to do. All right, next, we've got Go Random with random generation algorithms. So Mohammed's going to be giving us some tips and tricks on randomization, which I think is something that a lot of people, if you're new to development, it's easy to not realize the nuances of. So you might think like random is just random, but there are actually some differences. I've actually had multiple discussions at AAA companies about our random generator and the problem that it caused and having to change it out and how it had been changed out before. It can be a big thing that you don't realize is a big thing until you start to have a game kind of at scale and start to see the problems of a bad random generation. Next, we've got Powell, who's going to be talking about creating splines, rivers, and lakes with the Unity editor. If you haven't seen the new Unity editor terrain tools, it'd be, I think, getting a good preview of that and getting a good idea of how they build all of those really cool environments for nature manufacture stuff. So if you've got the Pro Pass, by the way, make sure that you go grab the asset pack that has that one of those environments. I think it's the nature forest environment. I've lost track now. It was one of the really cool environments. I have almost all of the nature manufacturer ones. So I love them. They're beautiful. It's like the packs that I started with when I started in Unity. If you've gone to the asset store, I'm sure you've seen them. But you'll learn how they build the rivers, the lakes, and all that stuff, and how to actually kind of do it the pro way. So go check that out for sure. Next, we've got one on custom editor tools by Peter. He's going to be talking about creating node-based tools in Graph Tools Foundation. So if you've done node-based tooling stuff before, it's super valuable. It's super useful for, at least in my experience, for designers to be able to drag nodes around, connect them, and set up things for abilities or quests or dialogues, stuff like that. It can be really handy. So I'm curious to see the Graph Tools Foundation side of this stuff. I don't know that very well. And I always just love custom editor tool stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Next, we've got Shane and Matthew from Game Driver talking about testing. And I mentioned this in the sponsor section a little while ago. But if you haven't used Game Driver before, or at least seen it, I'd recommend just go watch a quick video. Go watch a Game Driver demo video and see what it does. It essentially plays your game like a normal human and then gives you back the results. Lets you know whether or not things work, whether stuff broke, and it can do it at high speed and kind of automate all of that. It works on a whole bunch of different platforms, and you don't have to go in and write a bunch of unit tests. It's not like you have to refactor and change all of your code to make it work. It kind of works for your game. It's one of those tools that I always wanted when I was working at when I was working on MMOs. Like this would be perfect, and now it actually exists as a product. So we always tried to build these automations and made nothing anywhere near as cool. And now you can just grab it and put it into your own game. It's really, really cool. Or not really put it into your game, but put it on top of your game to test it, make sure that nothing goes wrong throughout the entire development process, which if you're building a game with updates, definitely happens a lot. Thinking back on all of the times that we pushed out a build, pushed out a release, and then rolled it back or rolled it forward to the fix. Sometimes, a lot of times, they had to roll it back because we didn't even know what was causing the problem. All right. Speaking of rolling back, actually, that's a perfect transition to Gregory's talk on Git 101 for Unity. So if you haven't been using any source control, well, you're making a huge mistake. You should definitely be using some source control. I personally like Git and Plastic. I think that they're both great options. Depending on how big your team is and who you're working with and how experienced they are. Gregory is going to be explaining Git and I think talking about some of the benefits of using it. And I've used it many years throughout my career, and it's I know it is the most popular source control system out there. So it's definitely worth knowing. It's not that complicated. If you've thought about it and you looked at it and you're like, oh, I have no idea what to do, this is overwhelming. It's really not. It's just that there are so many ways to do things in there that the presentation of it can be overwhelming. So sometimes people show Git in the least user-friendly way. I don't expect that with this. This is for Unity, so it's going to show you how to use it for Unity-specific things, and I believe diving into things like LFS, so that you know how to use it for large files and the Unity specific stuff. After that, we've got Brian and Tor talking about clean code. So this is well, Tor is a big clean code proponent. It's funny. Me and Brian were talking about this a couple of weeks ago about how good Tor is at talking about clean code, and I'm really excited about this. Tor is one of the main developers on Odin. So if you haven't seen Odin Inspector, well, you I don't know why you wouldn't have. You probably have seen Odin Inspector. If you haven't, though, make sure that you check it out. All the ProPass people got it free for a year. Just make sure you go redeem that. But it is an amazing tool for Unity. It makes it so that Unity just kind of does a lot of the things that you wish it did. Like my favorite, Brian, the button. I just joke with Brian about it. You add like a little button attribute over a method, and then it adds a button into the inspector. That's one of like hundreds of things. But I would say that that's like the one thing people call out because it's so freaking useful. You have to right click, just get a button with one attribute. But you get lots of other really cool stuff. I mean, tons of other really cool stuff, including the validator too, which I want to talk about sometime in the near future. I've been using it a lot lately, and it's pretty awesome. All right. After that, we've got a talk on something a little bit different. And this is one of the few that's not code specific. I think we've got two that are not really kind of like diving into code and workflow, but I think that they both make a lot of sense for indie developers getting started. So this is the In-Between Client Wish, Budget, and Dev team, and it's focusing on team management with Amir. And I'm kind of curious to see what advice this is going to bring for developers who have want to start up a small team or have started up a smaller indie team and are trying to build it and trying to figure that out. It's one of the things that causes a lot of problems. People get together, they want to start building a game, and then they fall into all of the problems of having a company on top of making a game. So we'll see what's in here. I'm excited for it though. If you've got anything like that, you've got a small team that you're putting together, or you're working in a bigger company and trying to do some of that management side of it, make sure that you're there for that one. But I think the small team, even if you're not managing, like it's you and 2 or 3 of your buddies, this is going to apply. So make sure that you come to that. Now, the next talk is one that I know a lot of people, or at least a lot of my friends, are very excited about, and that's Jason Story's "Gotta Catch 'Em All" talk on game architecture. So I don't know if I should spoil too much of it, but it's a very, I think it's a very good. Getting distracted by chat. I got to minimize the window real quick. It's diving into data management, data access, and using all that in a clean way in Unity games. So if you've seen Jason's Story talk, he's got tons of really good stuff, and he's just, I think, a font of knowledge. He's a very, very smart dude with tons of info, and this is going to be really cool. And it's Pokemon themed. I've seen a quick preview of it. It's going to be fun. Make sure you don't miss that. If you come to anything, and you're building a game with any kind of data in it, and you want to worry about saving, loading, any of that kind of stuff, you got to come to that one. After that, we've got Miguel talking about using blend trees for animation. If you're not using blend trees, and you're building a 3D game especially, then you probably are missing out, especially if you don't know how to use blend trees. Make sure that you come to this, because blend trees are extremely powerful. They really simplify the animator. I say simplify. It's like complicating it, but makes things much simpler. So you use one little component to simplify a lot of other things. And you can do some really cool stuff with blend trees and stacking them up. So this will be a really cool one. And after that, we've got the other talk that's not really code related. This is Rick's talk on how to get game jobs now that AI has arrived. So last year, Rick did a talk on getting into the game dev industry and getting your career kind of kickstarted. Now, I didn't want a lot of repeat content, but with Rick's, I definitely did. I wanted him to come back and give an updated version of something like that, because that talk was so good and so useful. That felt like anybody who needs a game dev job, like that's the thing they needed to watch. Go watch that talk, and then you'll kind of know like all of the steps. He basically lays out, at least last year, laid out all of the advice that I would give in a very tight little package of like 20 minutes. Explained everything that you should do, why you should do it, why it matters, and why it makes a big difference for getting jobs. So make sure that you come to that if you're interested in getting a job. If you already have a job and you're super happy with it forever, you don't ever want another one, then maybe don't worry about it. But if you ever want to get a new job, I would say go check it out. He's full of great advice, and Rick is freaking brilliant. So don't miss that one. All right, last day. We've got day 5. We'll be starting off with Jason talking about shipping your Unity augmented reality game with Unity's XR simulation. Diving into the more of the Unity specific tooling. So if you haven't used Unity's XR simulation, it allows you to simulate basically being in an augmented reality environment. I've only played with it lightly myself since it's been newly kind of updated. There's it's been through a whole bunch of updates and changes, and now that there's a new one, I kind of want to dive in there. Like I said, I want to get in with the VR headset and try that out, and I also want to see how I can tie that in with the AR side in Unity too. I'm not sure exactly what I want to do with it, but I feel like this is going to give me a lot of good inspiration and figure out what I want to do VR and AR wise. And also just give me the tips on how to do it the right way in Unity with the latest stuff. So I'm really excited about that. We've also got transitioning prototype architecture into production architecture by Tony on day 5. So this is going to be, I hope, full of really cool like tricks that I'm going to want to like lock into my brain. I'm going to try to make sure I get lots of rest on the 4th so that this kind of sticks in my head, because prototype architecture, I think everybody is kind of familiar with. You start to build stuff, you want it to go really fast. You want to build stuff fast. You want to put things in fast, but then you start to run into problems when you get to scale and want to go to production. So this talk should explain some tricks and tips and kind of the process on making that switch. So I'm going to be ready and taking notes. Although luckily, remember, all of the sessions are also recorded. So even if my brain is totally shut off on Friday, on the 5th day, I'll be able to go back and watch it next week too. So I'm excited for that. I feel like a couple of them I'll probably end up having to rewatch by the end of the week, because I don't know how long, how well my brain will be going by Friday. We'll see though. After that, we've got Alejandro talking about optimizing at runtime. And this is, I think, our only real talk on optimization. So we've got Johnny's talking a little bit about dots, but the real optimization, if you want to speed up your game, this is the one, which I think is kind of perfectly lined up right after Tony's talk on switching to production architecture. So kind of see the process of taking the prototype, going into something production ready, and optimizing it right afterwards, and kind of get that all in your head and think about how you want to apply some of those things to your own games. After that, we've got Ahmed talking about lessons learned from shipping a big game, code practices, architecture, and useful tools. So once you've kind of got the process for how to re-architect your game, be able to dive into picking up some extra, or we'll get to talk about and go over some extra tips and architectural things that have probably come up when building a big game and putting it out there. I'm starting to run out of breath here, but we've only got 3 talks left, so I'm going to go through them without taking a drink. After that, we've got our final AI talk of the conference. Jabril is talking about creating full games only using AI. And I've seen he did at least one video on this, and I think it's really cool. If you haven't seen Jabril's channel, by the way, go check him out on YouTube. Huge YouTube channel, does really great videos that are very detailed and really well edited and really put together on game dev related topics and tech stuff. So it's really cool. I would go check it out, and I want to see what he's been able to do with AI stuff, because he takes projects and unlike me, he takes projects and he just goes on them for like a long time. He seems like build and build and build and build on them and make something really huge out of them instead of making new projects. So I want to see what he's kind of come up with. After that, we've got Antonia talking about building XR multiplayer, which is going to be very cool. So if you've never done XR stuff, which I'm really curious to see, actually, this is going to be on VR or AR because it's going to be cool either way. It's a lot of fun setting up and seeing people with multiple headsets on, and also doing it with the mobile devices. And I just want to see Antonia's talk though. We had to meet her at GDC. It was a lot of fun. She's super cool and very great presenter. It's going to be very awesome. I think she also kicked off a YouTube channel. If so, I'll make sure to send that out in an email too. If you didn't start that YouTube channel yet though, Antonia, make sure that you do. And if you did, send me the link and I'm going to send it out in an email, because everybody should go subscribe and go check it out. She's been kind of a leading advocate on all this XR stuff. And I ran out of voice for a second there. So anyway, we'll go check that out. That'll be on the 5th, on the second to last talk. And the final talk of the conference is another one on game architecture, where we're going to be diving into practical scriptable object architecture. This is something that I think comes up a lot. We've talked about it a lot on the Game Dev Show, using scriptable objects to build out your game and to do the entire architecture process. So I want to see you use take on this and see how it differs from the ones that I've seen in the past. It's practical, so that the word practical alone gets me excited. I want to see what we can do to use this in games without having to redo too much. So I'm really excited about that. All right, that's our entire schedule. Sorry if that was a little bit long, but we've got a lot of talk. We've got a lot of speakers coming up and a lot going on. So I'm going to take my drink right now.
Jason, while you do that, do you mind if we get to some questions? There's some questions that came through. I just want to make sure that we're answering them in a timely manner.
Yeah, let's get to them.
All right, cool.
All right. So first, Anonymous asked, can only pros access the expo hall? Yes. Yeah, the expo hall is a service we got set up, and it's not the cheapest. It requires the Pro Pass though to get in. There should be a link down below though with I think maybe a discount code on there. Okay, next question. So I got pop-ups appearing. Oh, Chris's talk sounds super useful. It does. Yeah, the talk Chris is giving, which is tomorrow morning, it's the first talk of the day, is about unit testing in games and trying to make that easier without having to rewrite their entire game workflow. I've done unit testing in Unity, and if you don't think about it from the start, it can be kind of difficult to backport into your game. You got to refactor things and start to usually use the humble object pattern. So I'm really curious to see what his new take on this is and how he's going about doing it. Chris is like one of the unit testing guys, I think, in the world. Like, not just in games, but like outside of games as well. There's talks on this at big conferences everywhere. Unit testing and mob programming. It's like the guy to go to. So will the talks all eventually be posted to YouTube after completion of the conference? The sponsors' talks will be posted on YouTube. The others' talks will not. But if you have the student pass or the pro pass, you have access to all of the talks shortly after they go up. I think a lot of them kind of the same day. Is that right, Joe? Is it the same day that they get access to the sessions?
Yes. Well, usually a day or so. I have to edit the Q&A. So what happens is we'll upload the sessions, and then I have the 9-hour live stream that I need to chop out into each live Q&A, and I'll upload it there as well.
Oh, okay. So yeah, get the sessions pretty quick, and yep. The other ones in a day or so. Right. But yeah, the sponsor sessions will also be up on YouTube sometime shortly after.
Cool.
What else we got? All right. I live in a time zone where a lot of these talks are when I'm in bed. Are they being recorded? Yes. So yeah, I guess that's kind of back onto that same question. So they're all recorded. The Q&As will all be recorded and then available on that My Conferences page.
Yeah, so it's almost like a membership site. So what I'll have is under day one, I'll have day one, the fully unedited stream that you can watch the whole thing. And then in 24 to 48 hours, I'll edit all those out and add them to the day for each of the speakers' individual sessions. Hopefully that makes sense. If anyone has any questions, just hit me up in Discord or GatherTown.
All right. So is that all of the questions that we had?
Those are all the questions for now. Back to you.
All right. Well, I think we're just about ready to get started with the first session. We get Thomas Brush will be coming up in about 15 minutes. Until then, I wanted to make sure that everybody who's here with us live knows how to ask questions. Again, there's a Slido link or on the page. If you're with us on the actual page, you should see Slido off to the right. You can also go to, if you want to use it on your phone, there's the Slido app. And Joe, can you pop back in and tell them what was it? It was the keyword guild.
Yeah, so you just go to slido.com and there'll be a thing for a code. It's just guild, GUILD, and that'll get you access directly into to ask questions within Slido.
Nice. Yeah. So just go ahead and submit questions. If you've got questions for the speakers when the sessions are playing, or during the Q&As, or during the other stuff like right now, feel free to pop them up. Oh, I need to turn on another light here. Just realizing how gray everything looks. Anyway, if you're not with us in the expo hall and you have a pro pass, make sure that you come join us. We've got quite a few people here. It looks like running around. I'm going to go check it out right now. Joe, can we pop up the expo hall for just a second and give everybody a quick view of what's going on? Let's see. Where is everybody? Oh, all of the booths. No, just run around and check it out. So in the expo hall, I wanted to just show there's a couple of different things we've got over here. Just a couple areas for chatting. Joe, can you put me on follow? I'll run over to you real quick. Let's go find Joe's hanging out down here in the staff room. Oh, is he stuck? I'll go open the door for him. There you go. You can come out, Joe. Oh, there we go. Am I on follow?
Okay.
There he is. All right. Cool. So if you haven't been into the expo hall yet, let me make sure this is muted. This is what it looks like. You can run around, talk to all of the other developers here, and go check out the booths. We've got a couple areas dedicated to chats on specific topics. This one's not on money. It's monetization and jobs. I think it was actually just jobs. So jobs over there. We've got a booth over here. We got Etonics hanging out at the Shattered Souls booth. I'm going to go straight through here. The Backtrace booth. This is green area is my story corner for Jason's story chats last year. There's so many people surrounding him everywhere that just needed a dedicated area. So he's got a big green area with lots of brains on the table. You can go check it out. We've got an AI section here. We've got the Ceremonies booth where Brian was just a little while ago. I think he ran over to talk to other people. And a couple little toasters there, some cook. We've got the Hot Reload booth here, which is for all the Pro Pass people got access to Hot Reload. If you haven't checked it out yet, you probably should. If you're building a game and you're having to stop playing, start playing again to make changes to your game, this thing can really speed up that process. It's one of the things I wish I had access to when I was doing a lot of MMO development. It would have saved me so much time. So they've got a booth here. We got the two Unity booths up top, and then a big section in the middle, a Cinti booth over here, an area to chat, and there's even an area for Test Guild. And then, there's Pal over here hanging out at the Nature Manufacturer booth. Real quick. Hey, Pal. Okay, I'll run off before he notices what's going on and waves back. All right, so Joe, you want to pop me back up? So that's, if you've got a Pro Pass, make sure that you just hop in there, come join us in the expo hall. And if you don't, that's fine. Just make sure that you join us in the chat on the side, say hello, and well, not really hello, but say, ask your questions. If you got any questions at all, please feel free to drop them in there. And if you got a student pass, make sure that you come join us in Discord. And there's, I think, a little bit of chat there going on. Hang out and talk to some of the other students as well. All right, I think we're going to take a quick break now until we're just about ready to start up the next session. So go ahead and grab a drink, grab some food, get a snack. Hey, there's Matt. How's it going? He's got a nice booth up here too. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see my screen. I'm in the expo hall now, checking everybody out. Go over to the Warlord Britannia booth real quick and hang out. So yeah, we'll be back in just a few minutes. Get ready for the first session with Thomas Brush. We've got lots of interesting game design stuff coming up. So we'll see you in just a second.
Yo. Oh, great. Is he asking about Jason? Just send him the free pass for now while we work it out. So it's backup stream. So, yep, just a heads up. Thomas question session's 20 minutes long. Just so you know, Jason. Do you want me to bring you back on stage and have you say, okay, here's our next session by Thomas question? Just play it. Okay. Yeah, a few people said they're disappointed in Discord. I would see if they're past customers and if they are. Yeah. Yeah, this guy's asking, how can I get a refund now? So I don't know if you're in Discord, Andreas, but I don't know the name of the person. I can't pronounce it. It looks like it's from Thailand. What?
All right. Hello. Welcome back, everybody. We're just about to go live with Thomas Brush. So if you're here, make sure you put your questions into the side in the Slido chat, and we'll be here with Q&A in about 20 minutes at the end of the session. So let's get started.
All right. How's it going, guys? My name is Thomas Brush, and I am an indie game developer. I used to make games completely solo. Now I work with a very small team, and we make small, independent games. Something that I really struggled with in the past was properly designing a game. I know it sounds weird. You can make a game. I mean, you can make a game however you want. You can make a game completely backwards and completely screw up the process. But at the end of the day, it's going to take you way longer, and you're probably not even going to finish your game because you've done it in the incorrect order. Okay, so I really want to teach you guys something I wish I would have known, because it would have probably shrunk my game's development schedule probably in half. Okay, so the goal of today's webinar is to design a game like a pro. Okay, and it's not just so that you feel good about yourself, but it's so that you save a ton of time and you can get games done way faster and start making some money. Okay, now again, my job for the last, I think it's been like 7-8 years, has been making games, indie games, full time. So I made a game called Pinstripe. And not only did it get a 5 out of 5 from Time Magazine, but it also took 5 years of my life to make this game. And it really shouldn't have. It really should have went so much faster. And what I'm going to teach you guys in this webinar, it's ultimately going to show you how I could have made this game Pinstripe and the games that I'm currently making, how I can do it much faster. Okay. I also made a game called Neversong, and this game took less time. Okay, so this took about 2 years, maybe closer to 2.5 years, maybe, to make this game. So I was figuring out how to shrink the process down and how to make games faster with proper game design. But it really hasn't been until my third game, which is called Twisted Tower, that game where me and my team are using a much more professional process. And I'll be honest with you, I've learned a lot from my team member, Felipe, who's my team's lead 3D artist and level designer. I've learned so much about his process and how you're supposed to make games professionally. And Felipe has a degree in level design or game design. And so I'm going to just show you what we've learned as a team and what I've learned from him and what I've learned from these previous games that took me way too long to make. Okay. So again, the goal is for you to make games way faster and to make fun games, really, really fun games with great mechanics, but more importantly, a great process. So it doesn't, cause you to get stressed or anxious or depressed. All right. I'll just be honest. That's how it was for me. Always anxious because I didn't really know what I was doing. Ultimately, at the end of the day, great game design is all about doing less. Less is more. You can actually make a much funner game at way less cost to your emotional health and your schedule. You can really reduce the time by using less, okay? And it's all about the process. It's a step-by-step game design process, okay? So let's start with step 1. I know this sounds weird, but I want you to start with the look and feel, because the look and feel is going to help you determine what ultimately you're capable of. So let's say look and feel is really, really important to you, and you want to make a game that looks like BioShock. Well, if you're making an indie game, you probably want to tone down your mechanics and make more of like a walking sim, okay? But if instead you're really inspired by the mechanics of BioShock, then you need to be thinking, okay, maybe I'll tone it down and make something that looks a little bit more like Half-Life, okay? So really it's about, are you more of a look and feel kind of person, or are you really more of a mechanics kind of person? Because you need to balance that out as a game developer, especially an indie game developer. You have limited time, you have a very small budget, if a budget at all. And so this look and feel process, putting together an inspiration board of what you want your game to look like, that'll actually help you determine what your mechanics are and vice versa, okay? So what are a few games that inspire you? And by the way, you can use AI art concepts if you don't have a game that looks like the game you want to create. Use AI art. This is totally fine. Me and my team use Midjourney all the time in creating our AI or our concepts for our games. What do you feel you or maybe or your team are capable of, right? This look and feel process is really going to help you with that. And ultimately, I want you to put all this together into an inspiration board. Okay. Share it with your team. If you're working solo, print it out, put it on your wall. This is the goal of my game. This is the goal of what it's going to look like. Okay. So that's the first step. It shouldn't take you long. Now we're going to get into the nitty gritty. Now we're going to really start to build out our game using a proper game design process. Creating a GDD or a game design document. It's like biblical in its importance. It's like the constitution of your studio, of your game. Okay. Without this, you're probably going to do what I did in the past, which is spend 5 years on a game because you have no idea what the game design is. You have no idea what the mechanics are. So the goal at the end of this step, after creating a game design document, the goal is actually to have a toolkit of prefabs that contain the mechanics, right? So enemies that walk, enemies that run, enemies that fly, coins you can collect, keys, doors. These are all prefabs that are ready to go and you can just drag and drop them into your scene. So that's the goal of this step, to create all of that inside of Unity or Unreal. So you want this toolkit so that it's fun to make your game. You want to feel like you're playing Minecraft or Roblox while you're creating your game. What I mean is, in those games, you have tools available to you to construct your world. The same is true with your game inside of Unity. You want to have your project window with all of your assets, and you can just drag them into the scene and make a game. You want the process of building out your levels and your level design process. You want it to be fun. And right now we need to put that together. Okay. So again, we start with a generic game design document. Now, I'm not going to tell you a specific game design document to use because frankly, I've used 3 or 4 different templates. So you can just Google game design template or game design document template or GDD template and look for the one that best suits your project. There's a lot of different ones. There's not a perfect one. So just Google it and find the one you like and focus specifically. This is crucial. You want to focus specifically on your game loop, okay? And the unique actions required to complete the loop. Okay, so for one of the games we're working on, the loop is very simple. You enter a new level, you use the abilities that you've already earned, and you fight a boss, and he gives you a new ability that takes you to a new level. Okay, very simple loop. Your goal is to construct all the mechanics that are fit within that game loop. That's the enemies, the keys, double jumping, dashing, rolling, breaking boxes, all of that, NPCs. Craft all of that that's necessary for the loop to be completed and put it into a nice clean folder on inside of Unity or Unreal. And this is your toolbox for all of your mechanics prefabs, okay? We want to build these out first. Notice how we're building these out first, and we are not building out the level first. We're not making a beautiful forest and we're not trying to make Kirby by making it look like Kirby. We're trying to make Kirby, let's say that Kirby is our inspiration, okay? We're not making the Kirby world right now. We're making the Kirby mechanics. The world is secondary, okay? Don't eat your cake first. We need to start with the vegetables, and that's what the mechanics are for, okay? And we're just going to build out these mechanics in a simple sandbox level. A sandbox level is as simple as just a massive terrain or a big flat cube. And that's where all of our assets, we're putting all these mechanic assets, testing out the enemies, testing out the NPCs, testing out the jumping, dashing, double jumping, all of that, okay? And you want to make sure everything feels incredible. Now we can move into the level assets, the level art assets, okay? We want to either source these from the Unity Asset Store or just create them from scratch, okay? Now notice we're not putting these into a level and making a level right now. All we're doing is sourcing them. We're sourcing them and getting them ready to be used. Again, what we want is a toolkit or a toolbox, okay? So we already finished up our mechanics assets. Now we want to finish up our art assets, okay? So we have our enemies, we have our player, we have our NPCs that we can talk to, we have our keys, we have our boxes. That's done. Now we need just the beautiful level arts. Okay? So the level art assets, that's the pillars, the walls, the ceiling pieces, the stairs, the railings, right? Or if you're making an outdoor game like Legend of Zelda, the trees, the rocks, the grass, the terrain brushes, the textures. A lot of our textures come from textures.com. And you combine all of that, whether it's custom assets like this shower here that we're putting into this bathroom scene, it's a custom asset, or Unity Asset Store assets, okay? Or Sketchfab. Now we're ready to move on to step 4, okay? Now that we have our toolkit of our mechanics, we have our toolkit of all of our level art assets, like our textures, our meshes, our 3D art, or 2D sprites. Now that all of that is created, we're ready to start building out our level map, okay? Now, you'll notice that we have a legend here for this very simple top-down map. And this legend has just a few items that we're using, a few mechanics, okay? It's really important to note that in our mechanics toolkit that we're creating with all of our mechanics prefabs, we're not making that much. Again, a key, a door, a platform that moves, an NPC. It's all very simple. And the goal is to combine these and create more complex systems, okay? So really less is more. A few mechanics can really go a long way, especially with an indie game. The same is true with level art, and we're going to talk about this in a second. But just a few assets can make a beautiful level, okay? And we're doing that right now with one of our games where we have this beautiful mountain scene. And you can explore this huge world. And it's really only 3 different pieces of ground that we just copy and paste and build out this huge world. So your goal is to keep it simple, because when you're sourcing your assets, you're going to feel very overwhelmed. Because if you download one of these asset packs, like an RPG asset pack, you will be overwhelmed because there's going to be hundreds of assets. Your goal is to curate all those assets. Your goal is to curate mechanics that inspire you from other games. Curate them down into two toolkits, the mechanics toolkit and the level art toolkit. There's like 20 in each. Enemies, NPCs, the character controller, coins, keys, doors, levers, switches, and your level art. Platforms, stairs, trees, rocks, houses. Now that you have those toolkits available to you, that's when we finish up our sketch, okay? So I just wanted to preface all of that that's what we want to have before we start this process of sketching our map, okay? Now the goal is to sketch out a map with every mechanic at your disposal, and then also keep in mind your level art that you have at your disposal. And it's so much easier. It's so much easier when you start with the legend, okay? So what I mean is, let's say you open up your notebook, okay? Maybe you want to do it by hand, or you open up Photoshop. Instead of laying out your level first, okay? Instead of laying out your level and the maze of maybe the labyrinth, maybe you're making a Metroidvania, instead of laying all that out first, lay out your legend, okay? So that's what we always start with. We say, what are the mechanics at our disposal? Again, we have that toolkit. What are our mechanics? What are the tools that we can use at our disposal? Do we have double jump? Do we have the pistol? Do we have the axe? Okay. What are those mechanics available to us? Put those in the legend, okay? And then build a level from that legend, as opposed to building a level and then trying to figure out how to incorporate your mechanics, right? Now, the goal is to be able to play this level in your head as you look at the map, okay? So me and my brother, when we were younger, he would design these top view maps and put keys and NPCs and doors and levers and switches, he would lay all that out on paper and then he would give it to me and he would say, beat the level, right? And I didn't have a controller, I had a paper, right? And so I would just look at the paper and beat the level in my head. You really need to be able to do that here. Okay, it doesn't matter whether you're making a 2D game, a 3D game, top-down RPG, strategy game, whatever it is, you should be able to beat this level, okay, with just this sketch. Doesn't mean we don't iterate. It doesn't mean we don't change it. But overall, this is the starting point, okay? Next, we move to the block out, okay? You're going to be so tempted. You're going to be so tempted to start building out a beautiful world now. You're going to think, I understand the map. I'll be fine. I'm going to work on the trees here, the rocks here. Don't do that. You got to resist the temptation. What you want to do is block out a hyper simplistic map with every mechanic at your disposal, okay? And ultimately, at the end of the day, you should be able to play this level fully. But it's going to look terrible, and it should look terrible, okay? So this is an example of one of our blockouts from Twisted Tower. This is using ProBuilder. ProBuilder is great for blocking out levels. It's just a tool where you can just do simple walls and floors. You want to do the same thing with a 2D game. Basically just use simple cubes. It's important to note that whether you're making a 3D game or a 2D game, you want the blocks, the building blocks of your blockout, okay? Whether it's the walls or the platforms in a 3D game or just simple sprite platforms in a 2D game. You want those to have a consistent size, okay? So this is why it's so important to build out the mechanics. When you build out, for example, the player movement first, you know how high the player can jump. You know how far the player can dash or roll, okay? Now that you know those values, you then build the level around that, okay? So in the case of Twisted Tower, the game that we're currently working on, we know that the player jump height is 4 unity meters, okay? Because of that, all of our blockouts utilize a grid size of 4 unity meters. Makes things so much easier to create our level design. But you'll notice that if you do this properly, when you do the blockout and you start incorporating your mechanics from the mechanics toolkit, you'll start to notice that some things look very detailed while other things look very basic. Okay, you've got very basic walls, but the doors are beautiful, right? This little target behind the door, which is our hook shot target, where you can shoot a hook shot, kind of like Zelda, that's very beautiful. The levers are very beautiful and polished. There's some lighting below this lever that's really polished, okay? Well, that's because some of our prefabs are completed, okay? Our mechanics prefabs are completed. The lever and the light here, as a unit, they're completed, okay? As a unit, the door is completed. And that's so that we can actually add these to our level, to our blockout, and actually play the level, okay? We want this stuff to work so that we can test out the level. But everything else, the walls, the floors, a lot of the static assets, those don't matter. What matters is what is interactive, because we're trying to create a level that actually works. Now, once you've tested this level out, once you've played it and had your team play it, or maybe sent it off to some friends to have them test it, that's when you're ready to begin polishing, okay? So this is step 6, and this is the funnest part. And this is the part that most people want to start with, including me. I wish I could start here. I just want to make a really beautiful bathroom scene. But it's so hard to polish up this bathroom scene and then build out the level and then realize that the bathroom scene is useless because it doesn't fit in with the design. Again, the level design, not the design of the art, but the level design. So here are some of the scenes as they're polished up, right? So as you can see here, if you look at this scene, this was a square room, okay? And the square room had a purpose in our map, okay? We have this bathroom here. It's a square room with a purpose. It has some enemies in there, and it also has some water that you can go in, dive into some of the pipes. So we created this simple wall first, okay? And behind this wall is the pipe that you can go down. That was all laid out first. And then we brought in, from our artwork toolkit, we brought in our faucets, our grates, our pillars, these half walls. We also had textures that were in the toolkit. Okay, these textures were from textures.com. Nothing crazy here, just found some assets and brought them into the scene. The same is true here. This is the final blocked out scene, okay? But it's also polished. So hopefully that process helps you, okay? I wish I had known this process when I was creating Pinstripe and Neversong, and I'm so glad I'm using this process for our current 2 games that we're working on. So be sure to follow this process and don't skip the steps, okay? Be very intentional, because you're going to thank me in the long run. It'll save you a lot of time. All right, let's jump into the QA. I can't wait to meet you guys. Can't wait to talk to you and hang out. Be sure to bring your questions. See you there.
You're muted. Jason, you're muted.
Of course I'm muted. Well, welcome back, everybody. That was really awesome. I have a couple questions for Thomas myself, so I'm kind of excited to jump into this. But if you have questions, make sure that you submit them in Slido. It should be just off to the side, or slido.com, and use the code GUILD to put those questions in. And we're going to ask Thomas. Can we bring Thomas on? I'm going to turn on my light because I realized that.
Hello.
All right, welcome, Thomas. Thanks for that talk. That was really cool. I was not expecting to pick up so many things that I plan on using next week. So I don't know if I told you about this, but sometime next week or the week after that, as soon as things die down a little bit, I want to start building a game, and I'm going through kind of this process now of figuring out the scope of it, what it is I want to build. And right at the beginning, you kind of hit on something I hadn't thought about, and I need to do, like figuring out, is it more about the mechanics, more about the visuals? Because I'm like back and forth on that constantly, like trying to decide, where do I land? Is it more about the visuals? And I think in this one, it's probably most about the story. So now I've got to try to figure out how to balance all 3 of those things.
Yeah, that's so true. For me, I always say to my subscribers on YouTube, whatever your forte is, like what you are gifted at the most, that sort of dictates everything else. Because I mean, that's what's going to help your game stand out. So for me, it's like the visuals are so important to me, because that's really my team's forte. And then we make sure that if we're going to focus on the visuals, what mechanics can we put into those visuals to keep the game economical and not blow out the budget? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's easy to do that too. That's one of the things I struggle with. I feel like if I could do the mechanics, but the second I start working on art, I'm afraid that I'm gonna do exactly that and just go way overboard, and suddenly it's going to become not something I can't complete. All right, that's my biggest fear, is that I'll overscope it because of that. So it does look like we've got a lot of questions. So I want to start taking a couple of them. One of them, the one that has the most votes right now, actually isn't really a question. It's more of a statement, but I think it kind of leads into a question. And it was by Sam. It was about the tools that they're using, and they said that another tool they use for a level map, or another tool they use, is Millinote, which allows you to kind of visualize or create an image board, so you can just do like a kind of a concept or storyboard of your game or your level. And they have a game design template. And I'm wondering, is there something else similar to that you use? Do you use any specific tooling? Are you mostly paper? Is it PowerPoint, or is it?
Well, so it really comes down to the goal of the GDD. So if the goal of the GDD is to create something to, oddly enough, publishers who are going to, let's say, fund your game for $500,000, those publishers are going to request a GDD, because they're going to toss it to their production team, and their production team's going to see basically if you're full of crap. And because if you're going to ask for a certain amount of money, they're going to look at your GDD and say, is this feasible? Does this person know what they're talking about? And so what I tend to do is, if I'm going to be making a GDD for a publishing pitch, I'll craft that GDD in a very beautiful way. So I'll use like Photoshop to create, like, I recently sent a pitch off to one of the bigger publishers. I can't say who. And all I did was use Photoshop because I wanted it to be the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. However, and I won't even use like a GDD template from like Milanote, or our team uses ClickUp for a lot of our project management. I'll just find the GDD that is best suited for the questions that publisher is probably going to have. So I'll basically distill down a GDD template into exactly what they're probably worried about, so that I can address their concerns. But if the GDD is for my team, then, and it's not for a publisher, then I just use Google Drive. I use Microsoft Word, or I'm sorry, Google Docs, because I like to have as much control over whatever I'm using. I want it to be what I understand. So Google Docs is what me and my team understand. Once we're done with it and we've like used Teamwork to edit it, then we'll make it look really pretty and put it into ClickUp, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And that's what I think a lot of people do. Most of the time, more than half the game companies I've been at and worked with, they use Google Drive and Docs for most of their stuff like that. And then eventually they have to show it off. They might make a PDF or a presentation for whoever the investor is, or the executive or something. But yeah, that's generally the way to go.
Yeah, so and just a quick side note, I just want to make sure like everybody, what I've noticed with a lot of game developers is they focus on the process as opposed to the end of the equation. What's the output that I'm trying to create, right? And so when you're thinking about what's the right process, like what is the right tool to use, stop thinking about what everybody wants you to use and what everybody says you should use, and instead be thinking, what am I trying to achieve here? Am I trying to achieve a pitch for a publisher, or am I trying to make it as clear and understandable for me personally, or maybe my small team? That should be your goal. So if it's Milanote, that's great. If it's ClickUp, that's great. If it's a pencil and paper, that's great. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You want to make the doc for the person who's consuming it, and not just a general doc just to make a doc, or to because you found a cool template. It should actually be helpful for the person who's using the thing.
Yes.
All right. So if you have a question, make sure that you submit it. And if you see a question that you like, make sure that you vote it up, because we're going to go with questions in voting order, with the ones that are the highest. And the next highest question is about whether or not the PowerPoint is downloadable. And that's probably one more for Joe. So Joe, do we make these presentations downloadable?
I can send it to you guys.
Yeah, if the speaker sends it to us, we can make them downloadable. It's up to the speaker. Yep.
Sure.
All right. Cool. So yeah, that'll be awesome, because that's going to really help me, especially reminding me the legend part. The legend part on the map was like a.
I give credit to my team for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I didn't think of that. It makes so much sense. It's going to make things drastically easier to figure out like what to design. I'm always like, oh yeah, I have that thing. Where should I put it here? Oh.
Right. Well, the question is, why do we play Minecraft for 8 hours on end? And the reason why is because we know our tools, and like we know what we can use, and that for some reason those limitations make it way easier to play the game. It's real. Like when I'm working on a game, it's so daunting. Same is true with like writing. Like when I like to write, so like writing a novel. If I don't have the parameters, it's so hard to move forward. Instead, you want to give yourself those parameters. So putting that legend or having your prefabs ready to go makes it so much easier to just make a level.
Yeah, I think it's going to completely change my level design process. So I'm really excited about it. This is exactly why I like doing this kind of thing, though, because like right away when you started doing that, I was like, oh, I want to grab some paper and just start doing this. That's kind of what I say. Like I want to start drawing out a legend, because I have some stuff in my head. I was thinking like I could just put it all right down, and it's going to solve my problem of I had this mini game I was trying to do. How am I going to do it? Now I know. Yeah. So that was super, super helpful. Matt had a question. Matt, by the way, released this awesome game on Steam, Warlord Britannia. I met him at GDC and got to check out his game. It's like overwhelmingly positive, thousands of reviews, and he's like started working on it in high school, finished it in college, and it's amazing. It's really, really cool. So thanks I just wanted to call that out while taking the question too. So can you give some examples of mechanics and the art balance, like the kind of balancing out, when you're making that decision? Are there trade-offs, or what do you,
Yeah.
do you have some?
Well, it's hard to give examples. So like, I'll just say what I've done in the past and what some of my friends have done. So one of my friends, David Whaley, he made this game called The First Tree. That game has a really good balance of art and mechanics. And the reason why I bring him up specifically is because the mechanics are insanely simple. And that's because David's forte is storytelling. His forte is art. So the smartest game devs, the most successful game devs are the ones who know themselves very, very well. So if you're not gifted in the mechanics realm, like me, I'm not very good at it. I say, okay, the forte of this game is going to be art. So like Twisted Tower, the game we're making right now, that game is basically like BioShock distilled down. So it's simpler. Mechanics are much simpler, with like a mix with like Squid Game for the story. In my head, I know that that's the hook. That's the thing that's going to sell the game. So you like, in order to think about the mechanics and art balance, you have to start thinking like a business owner. You have to think, okay, what's going to sell this game? How do I sell the most copies of this game? Well, you lean into your forte because that's probably going to be your hook. It's probably going to be what hooks people into the game. And then everything else is sort of scaffolding to support that forte, right? So for Twisted Tower, when it comes to the mechanics and the art balance, we've done everything we can in the GDD to ensure that the mechanics are stable and that they make sense and that they're fun. But we spent the majority of our time making something that looked really, really beautiful. So really, it's hard to come up with examples as opposed to just tell you the time spent. Like the time spent on the mechanics is smaller than the time spent on the artwork. And you really need to think about that when you're starting your game. It's like, okay, if you're going to spend the majority of your time on your forte, let's say it's mechanics, if you're going to spend the majority of your time on the mechanics of this game and you're going to sort of make art secondary, then you need to know that at the beginning of your production. You need to know exactly how you're going to be spending your time. So it's just like you need to understand your impetus and sort of the goal of the game. Like what's the goal of your game, and how do you sell copies? So it's really, it comes down to where you're going to spend the most of your time, basically. And you need to know that before you start your game.
And I think you, from what I'm getting here, probably need to make a conscious decision to actually choose to focus on the right things too. If you're good at mechanics, probably don't spend 70% of your time trying to make the art as good as the mechanics, and spend the 70% on the mechanics and 30 on art, and figure out a way to make that work. Or like your
It's kind of
story.
like, yeah, it's like I don't know why I've come to this conclusion. It's just been 10 years of making games, and I've just decided like there's no reason to role play a different job title when that's not what you're good at. So like with a bigger studio, with a AAA studio, sure. Like if you've got a ton of money, then you need to go hire out somebody who's really good at mechanics. But if you're small and you don't have a lot of money or time, you need to be efficient. And the fastest way to efficiency is doing what you're gifted.
Yeah. Yep. And even that scaled up side, like that's a totally different skill. Like you could be great at mechanics. Scaling up and building it into AAA and working with artists is not the same skill as being good at mechanics. You got to have another skill or person that's good at combining all this stuff together and keeping things going. It's definitely important. All right. Well, let's go on. We've got a lot of questions. So I'll take this one from Chills, and it says, how many or what kinds of levels do you consider for a MVP for a demo or playtest or a product? They're asking in the context of a solo dev, where making a demo would be something they do kind of before their marketing launch. They want to get like a demo up, maybe like I've seen some people do like a demo and a Kickstarter, and the demo is playable from the Kickstarter, or they want to give the demo out to publishers who are considering publishing the game and funding it. So what do you consider? Is there like a time limit, a level number, an amount of content, or just some set of rules that you follow for what's good enough for a demo?
Sure. I'll just say what me and my team do, and there's 3 different categories. The first category is a publisher. If you're making a demo for a publisher, time has nothing to do with it. They can see in 5 seconds, they're going to know whether it fits within their portfolio and sort of the paradigm of their business. They're going to know. So there's not really a point in wasting your time making a 30-minute demo for a publisher. They're going to open up. Most of these publishers, I've talked to so many in the last year because we're pitching products to publishers right now, and most of these publishers are like, "Oh, no, we didn't play the demo." I'm like, "What? Why are we having a call?" And they're like, "Well, we watched the trailers and we just knew." So it's the trailer, so trailers are a really good focus, or like just a quick little let's play. So like record the game, and they'll know in 5 seconds if it's worth it. So what you want to do for a publisher is you can secure like 250 grand plus with just 5 seconds they know. And so what you want to have is really it's about the hook. If a good publisher, when they see a good hook, they know. So a good hook is like insects but Metroidvania, aka Hollow Knight, right? Another great hook is like um, build your own cult. That's Cult of the Lamb, and that was sold to Devolver, right? That's really what a demo should achieve for a publisher, is a good hook. If you're trying to like create a pitch for Kickstarter with a demo, it's not really the demo that's going to get you funded on Kickstarter. It's really the way you present it and package it in the video. So again, you could make a full video with a 5-minute demo and then just show concept art of the various levels. So what I tend to do is I have one theme that I focus the demo on. So it's like, let's say a forest level. That's the demo. And then what I'll do is I'll show concept art for like various other themes, like snow level, carnival level, sand level, right? Those are just simple concepts that we throw together in like 4 hours. So you're creating this image of, you've got this idea of what you want the game to be, but when it comes to the actual demo, it's like a 5 to 15-minute demo of one level, right? Now, when it comes to satisfying a social media audience, or let's say you have an email list and you want to make them happy with a demo, that's where the demo really matters as opposed to the presentation of the demo. So then you want to do like a 15-minute demo to make your audience happy and make them feel like they're loved so that they want to buy the game when it comes out. So for that, I would recommend a 15-minute demo. Truthfully, Kickstarter, if it were me, and it has been, because I've been doing this for the last 6 months, creating demos, I do end up making a 15-minute demo for my games for publishers. But the reason I bring up the publisher thing, that they don't really care, is because I want the safest bet is to create a 15-minute demo with like one level, with all the best mechanics, and really polish that thing. But the truth is, I know how these publishers think, and they're going to know in the first 5 seconds. So hopefully that makes sense.
So most of them probably won't play it, but you like to have it there just in case they want to play it. I assume you also get some benefit from play testing it too.
For sure. Yeah, but like when it comes to the publishers, really quick, if they see in those first 5 seconds that the game has a wonderful hook and it fits within their portfolio, if they're smart, and I got to say, there's some publishers who have not asked this question, but the top tier publishers that I've talked to, they always go, okay, it looks like you've got a great hook. We love it. But can you prove to us that you can do it? And that's where the production team comes in, and they go, okay, let's play the demo. And they play the demo, and then they get a better idea. So to get you moving up the ladder, the first step is that 5-second hook. But as you go up the ladder, you better eventually have a demo for them that works. Otherwise they're not going to be able to trust you, right? Especially if it's your first game. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I think it probably gets. I'm sure it definitely gets a little bit easier. You got a little bit more experience, and you've gone through a few of them. But yeah, I think that, like you said, one level, 15 minutes is good enough. And like you said, most of them aren't going to play through it. Every now and then, I've found like a person from a publisher who just is really into it, and they just want to play, and they will sit there and play constantly. But yeah, most of them, it's like, out of the 5 people in the room, it's one of them, and then the rest of them are like, oh yeah, I saw the trailer, that's good enough.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So let's go on. We've got lots and lots of questions here. So this one says that the lecture was good. I thought it was great. And they were wondering what process you follow when selecting art assets. So you mentioned going to, was it textures.com, you said?
We do a lot of asset sourcing. So more than just textures.com.
What was the, what's your general process though?
Yeah, so it used to be do everything from scratch, and then I realized that's dumb. At least for me, it's just a waste of time. It's great, and you feel good about yourself, but at the end of the day, you're like, okay, where's my money? And you're like, well, I just spent it all for 5 years, and now I got to recoup all that back. So I look at game development much like a director looks at filmmaking, and it's kind of funny because the filmmaking industries and the game industries are starting to merge, which is really interesting. Like Blumhouse, I love Blumhouse. They make horror movies. They now have a game division. Annapurna does as well, and then also Bad Robot, which is to me very interesting that the game industry is starting to merge with the film industry. And the reason is because if you're going to make a game, one of the reasons is because game development now is much more like a directorial position as opposed to an artistry, like a classical artist job where you build everything from scratch. So I source I'm an illustrator. I write music. I can do all of it from scratch. Yet I refuse to do it now, and that's because it's so much quicker, faster, more efficient to source it all. So the sourcing process for me is Unity Asset Store to find systems and sometimes 3D models. It's like systems. What I mean is like assets to create like a dialogue system. It's probably better just to buy one that as opposed to spend 2 months making one, right? A save system. I think there's a system called Easy Save. I used Easy Save for Pinstripe. Pinstripe was from scratch, except that one I bought Easy Save because it was so hard to create a save system for Steam Cloud Save. But for 3D art, we use Turbo Squid, we use the Unity Asset Store, and then we also use Sketchfab. But the process for that is we download a model and we flip it to the point where it's unrecognizable, especially with humanoid or anything organic. Me and my team, we have enough humility to realize that's not something we're gifted at. And it comes down to your gifting. So even if you and your team are bad at organic stuff like 3D models or even organic 2D stuff, be humble enough to just go download something and use it. No one's going to care. Players don't care. So we downloaded a Teletubby, and we wanted like horrifying Teletubbies with pistols in our game. And so we just downloaded these Teletubbies, and then we flipped them like crazy so they don't look like Teletubbies anymore, but they still have that nice topology that's really difficult to create from scratch. So at the end of the day, the next step really quick is once you flip all that stuff, all of a sudden it's kind of like cooking. Your kitchen is covered in flour and sugar and spices and butter, and it's a mess. And then you're overwhelmed. That's what sourcing assets is like. It's always a mess. And me and my team are going through it right now with one of our games. The project folder is a mess. You've got all these folders you downloaded and assets, and some of them you don't want, some of you do want. So what we do then is we do a spring cleaning week where we take all the assets we like, all the textures we like, prefab them, clean them up, save them out, and then we clear out everything else. And what you end up having is a folder that looks like it was custom made, even though all of it was sourced from a bunch of different assets. And that's the crucial step. If you don't do that, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. Game development it's like building a house of cards. It's always going to feel like you're building a house of cards. So what you want to do is mitigate that feeling as much as possible. Otherwise, you're going to quit. So it's not that you're always clean. It's that you eventually consciously make an effort to be clean once you've decided on the look and feel and the assets you like. That experimentation process, it kind of has to be messy. It's kind of like working with clay or like painting. You're going to get messy. But once you figure out the process and you understand the assets you like, then you push that messy process aside and you move into a more managerial process. You organize everything in Unity, you get your prefabs ready to go, you create a process on, like we have it on ClickUp, where it's like, these are the assets we use, these are the textures we use, these are the websites we like. But that couldn't be locked in until you go through the messy stage of asset sourcing.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because otherwise you slow down too much. If you try to do all of
Mhm.
that planning and preparing before, I feel like it slows you down drastically.
Yes.
And I like that process of going fast and then cleaning up constantly. And I assume you're
Right.
cleaning up even more than once. It's probably not just like a one shot. It's probably
Always. Yeah. It's
continually
but
like, oh, we got to clean up again.
exactly. It's a phase thing. It's being a game developer is always, it's you're constantly shifting, and it can be very disorienting because you're going from one state of mind to another state of mind. The creative to the entrepreneur, from the entrepreneur to the marketer, right? And then suddenly you're in the finances, and that's because you can't do them all at the same time. It's really difficult. So you have to be willing to shift gears every 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, it's constant, especially when you're in indie. Like I said,
Yeah.
it's a very busy process. There's questions about that too. I don't know if we'll get to those. We're wondering
That's
how
okay.
you do all of the crazy numbers of things that you do. But I want to get to this one. Julian asked about the character movement. You kind of mentioned this, talking about getting your jump distances and your move distances and everything down. And they're
Mhm.
wondering, well, once you kind of have it down, do you still have to kind of tweak it later? Or is it locked in once you start moving into level design? You're like, okay, no, you jump 4 meters, or is it, 4 meters isn't right? Maybe we need to change it. Now it's 3, or
Yeah. Well, a good metaphor is, um, I'm looking at my house right now, my room, and I'm like, if I was building this house, would I decide that I want bigger windows after I've put the windows in? No, like that would be so expensive. You can do it. It's just going to screw up everything, right? So especially when it comes to like anything specific to your genre, you better lock that in fast, or you better lock that in before you move into like production, right? And this is just coming from experience, painful experience of changing jump height after I'm halfway through the game's development. Um, so I would argue you need to be pretty sure, like 95% sure about your character movement. Um, you can tweak it later. Like I said, you can. It's just gonna suck. So me and my team member Felipe, I think last week we're working on this other game concept other than Twisted Tower. It's this adventure game, and we spent a full 8-hour day on a Discord call just talking because we understood that we cannot go in and start creating a beautiful demo because we're going to pitch it to publishers. We can't create a beautiful demo until we've locked in all of that stuff, right? So you start with the abstract, which is like, does the player jump, right? Like Ocarina of Time, one of my favorite games, there's no jumping, whereas Breath of the Wild has jumping. You need to figure out that kind of stuff, the abstract core stuff. And then you go, okay, then what's the jump height? Well, the way to figure that out is you block out a very simple level and you play it and you have fun. And then you set it off to your friends and you see what they think. And then you get people saying, well, we really think the jumping is kind of lame. It's not very fun. And so then you tweak it then before, God forbid, creating 2, 3 levels and then realizing you need to move all of the platforms up or change the size of the models. And it gets especially tricky with 3D. With 2D, you can get away with tweaking stuff, but 3D's tough. But again, these are all things associated with your genre, right? There's a lot of things that you don't need to worry about too much, like tweaking the shoot speed of a gun might be a really big deal if you're making a game like Doom, right? Because suddenly all of the enemy design got screwed up because your shoot speed of the gun is different. Or like Halo, right? That would be terrible if you built the whole multiplayer system and then suddenly you decided you wanted to make the battle rifle shoot slower. It's like, well, that changes all of the balance of the weapons, right? Um, the same is true with a platformer, right? If you change the platforming mechanics later, well, that's core to the game. That's a big deal. But if the game is not a platformer, if it's an exploration game, then it's okay to change the jump height. It's just a walking sim. Who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. The things that are kind of core to the game, you've got to lock in. So I think about things like movement in an MMO, for example. You could probably tweak that afterwards, but you don't want to go tweaking like the combat and the abilities of every class, or changing
Yeah,
the damage formulas in the middle of it. You want to kind of lock that stuff in pretty early, because when you change it, everything falls apart and breaks almost
that's
instantly.
right.
So we've got time for a couple more questions. I want to take a couple from the student and pro people real quick. We got one from Eli, who's also a student of your full-time game dev course, which I think is awesome. And wanted to say thanks for the amazing presentation. And the question asked for your top 5 tips for project scoping. But I mean, if you can just give us 1 or 2, even, so we can go on
Yeah,
to a couple more questions. We got about 4 minutes left to take questions. So
sure.
I don't know if you got 1 or 2 tips on project scoping. I think it's something people fail a lot, and they overscope or
Okay.
project feature creep constantly and then never finish.
Right. First one is identify your hook. You really need a hook, and this is a marketing perspective. Okay, what will sell the game? Because at the end of the day, we all want to make money, right? What's your hook? What's going to grab people's attention, and they're going to be like begging to give you money? That's your hook. Okay, it needs to be simple, one sentence. Okay, identify your hook. That will help you know what you should put in your game and what you shouldn't put in your game, and everything should be sort of revolving around that. Another thing you could do, and we've talked about this, is lean into your forte. Oftentimes, the hook should be associated with your forte, your talent. So, whatever your talent is, everything should be secondary to that. It really comes down to prioritizing what's necessary and what's not. Um, Everything can't be necessary. Okay, it just can't, especially as an indie game developer. What is absolutely
Everything's
core?
max priority.
That's right.
Sorry.
You need, and that's really, I mean, seriously, like we all need to be finding like 1 or 2 things that are the priority. So for example, and then I'll be done with this question. For example, with Twisted Tower, the priority is we want a distilled version of BioShock. That's sort of the hook. I haven't seen a game like that, and I want a nice, simple indie version of BioShock and capture that BioShock audience. And the second thing is we really want to lean into story. So those are the 2 things, and they're associated with my forte, my passions, my talents. That's everything else is secondary. So you can determine, okay, is this feature creep? Is it worth it? Well, is it associated with my 2 things that I just mentioned? No, it doesn't matter. So push that aside. It's not worth the time.
I think that leads perfectly into Tim's question. We'll take this as the final one, which is about story. When do you think it's kind of clever or important to do your story design? Does it make like kind of, I guess the core of the question is, when do you think the story part should be put there? Do you think it's an important piece for the essence of your game, or is it something that you just add later? And it sounds to me like story is a big part of at least the game that you're building now. Is that always the case?
No, of course not. Story is, some games aren't story games, right? Story is a genre. It's part of your genre. So again, it comes the genre should be determined by your passions and your forte. You should not pick a genre that you don't understand or that you're not passionate about or that you're not good at. So if you're really good at mechanics and you're good at movement and player movement, a platformer is a great option. If you're really good at understanding player abilities and balancing out different classes and different groups, and you're really passionate about, let's say, um, uh, like classic like fantasy lore and different classes warring with each other, then it might be a really good idea to create an RPG, right? It's what you're passionate about and what you're gifted at that determines whether like something like story is important. This question, you could replace story with anything: art, music, um, mechanics, all that stuff. You need to start prioritizing stuff based on what you're gifted at. And this is again specifically related to indie game development because your budget is so small. So you have to be effective.
I totally agree. You don't want to spend too much time on the story if that's not the core of the game. If it's just for your own,
Yeah.
happiness, then maybe you should probably build a story game instead, and then build a game that's focused on the
Yeah.
story if that's the part that you're really enjoying working on and want to keep doing. So I think that's all we've got time for questions. But I wanted to say thanks again. That session was awesome, and I've got a couple things that I want to do right away. I'm going to start writing out a legend probably during the break time. I've got a little mini game in my head. I really want to get this legend on paper now and get started with it.
That's right.
Yeah, I wanted to say thanks again. And if you're not subscribed to Thomas Brush's channel, make sure that you go subscribe right now. Go check it out. And I don't know, Thomas, are you going to be around in the expo hall for a little while?
No, I can't today. We're making 2 different demos right now. We're just slammed, but I wish we could. But
all right. Well, I totally understand. We'll have lots of conversation going on in there anyway. So come join us in the hall if you got your Pro Pass, and come back in about 5 minutes. We've got another game design talk by Lana Lux, who's going to be talking about game design and building a solo project. And unlike Thomas, who's got a small team he's building, she's doing it all solo. So it'd be interesting to get a slightly different perspective, but I assume there's going to be probably following a lot of the same things that you're doing too, and hopefully got some cool stuff from your talk. So thanks again, Thomas, and we'll see you all in just a few minutes.
thank you.
Everybody, there we go. Hey, just a real quick announcement. I just wanted to jump in for anybody who's watching with us on YouTube live right now. Make sure that you come over to the GameDevGuild site. There's a link. I posted it in the chat of YouTube and in the description. There's a free 1-day pass. You can just go straight there, go watch the entire day for free. Come join us for the next, I think we've got 6 or 7 more sessions. I've already lost track of my time. So we got lots of cool stuff coming up. Make sure that you come join us for that. The link is in the chat and in the description as well. So we'll see you all there.
Jason, you muted on vMix. Jason. Jason, you muted. Jason, you were muted. Jason, you were muted. Hello, hello. Jason, you were muted. You're not muted on GatherTown. You're muted on vMix.
All right, welcome back to Game Dev Guild 2023. We're here with the second session. Sorry, I've been muted for a second, just getting ready. We've got Lana coming up, who's going to be talking about working solo on large games and wearing all the hats. This is going to be kind of almost the opposite of what we just saw with Thomas, who's been building up a team and outsourcing a lot of these things. Lana's going through the process of building a lot of it all on her own and doing it on stream live. So you can actually see the development process and see what it's like to build it and kind of see what the problems are that she runs into. I think this is extremely useful for me personally because, like I mentioned earlier, I want to build a game starting in the next month or sometime early this month or maybe next month. And I want to see what's working, what's not working, what kinds of problems people are running into, especially at this smaller indie scale, and what tools and other things I can use and kind of take from people, the lessons I can take to use in my own stuff. So I'm really excited for this one. Let's get started and go ahead and kick off the session.
What's going on? I'm Lana Larks, and today we're talking about wearing all the hats in game development. Let's start with the who, what, when, where, and why. My name is Lana Lux. I'm a game developer and Twitch partner. I've been working on my game Strain for 3 years now, and I've been live streaming the process of that daily on Twitch. So what hats am I wearing on this project? Programming, the asset creation, the art, so that's the 3D modeling, sculpting, texturing, rigging, animating. I'm doing the story writing, the game design, level design, and of course, the marketing, everything that goes into a game. It's mostly a solo project, so I'm doing all the parts of the game. I am trying to hire help where I can, but for the most part, it's a solo project, which means I am doing every part of it. So when I started this project 3 years ago, and I stream every day. So where, I don't know how relevant that is, but I'm in Canada. I could really do it anywhere. The streaming is on Twitch under Lana_Lux. Not where is not as interesting as the other question. So we'll go to the next one. So why? It's always been my dream to make games. I think it's such a powerful medium. And I think that there's so much that can be done with games, especially indie games, because we have the freedom to experiment and do new things. And it's such a cool kind of upcoming, I mean, it's been around for a while, but I think it's only going to be getting bigger and better. So I wanted to make a game that I was really excited to play, which is where Strain came in. I wanted to play a game like it, and I couldn't find one. I couldn't find surviving in the city without it being basically a first-person shooter. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make it. And I've been self-financing the project, which is why I'm wearing so many hats. It is not cheap to make a game, surprisingly. Who knew? Hiring people to do various parts of the game can add up very quickly. Which is part of why I'm like, I'll just do it then, I guess. And why don't I just buy my assets? Well, that adds up as well. And especially if you want it to look unique and interesting. And just to be clear, I do hire where I can and I do buy the odd asset. But for the most part, the self-financing part on a budget does mean that I do wear all the hats and I do the large majority of it on my own. Now we move on to the how, and this is where we're going to stay for a while. I'm going to cover a number of the different hats that I wear as a solo game developer, and I'm going to look at some of the challenges of that particular area, some of the benefits that do come along with doing things solo, and some tips that I've learned along the way to share with you. With the development of the game, the programming side of things, the biggest challenge with that is that, you're the only person on it. So it only gets one brain on it. And if you get stuck on something, that can be a real challenge because, if you're with other people, maybe somebody else can jump in and help you out or you guys can discuss it. But if it's just you, you can be stuck for sometimes days on end, especially if you're just starting off. So that's the biggest challenge of the development side. The benefit, of course, on working solo with this is that, you don't have to read other people's code, and you don't have to worry about other people reading your code for a large part. You will have to read your own code later, so you don't want to leave it too messy, but you can do things the way you want. You can be a little bit more relaxed because you're making your bed, you got to lay in it, so you make it as clean or as messy as you like. Some tips for programming a solo project would be not to leave your code too messy because, like I said, you will be coming back to it. You'll forget how you did things. You do want to keep it clean. There's a lot to do, so it's important also not to fixate on things and not to be a perfectionist. But you'd at least want to be able to read your own code later. If that means commenting, if it means really good function names, variable names, whatever helps, that will help you the most. And then to go back to the part of getting stuck, I highly recommend having some resources on hand that you can go to get your code looked at and get help with a quick turnaround. There's nothing worse than being stuck on a problem for days and you're sitting there checking Stack Overflow and nobody's responding. There's so many resources online now that you can get quick answers. I highly recommend scouting those out and having a list of them that you can go to when you're stuck so that you don't stay stuck for very long. I'm lucky because I stream all day, so I'm constantly connected to, a few hundred people at a time. And if I get stuck, I often get some suggestions for help. Sometimes I get many suggestions and different directions, and not all of which are correct. But I do get feedback quickly, so I can at least have some ideas of things to look into. Whereas if you're not getting any feedback for a while, you don't even know what to look up. You don't even know what direction to try. So highly recommend quick feedback, quick turnaround on the feedback. So with asset creation, the biggest challenge to this is that it's a big time consumption. I'm doing a sort of semi-realistic, a little bit stylized art style, which means there's many parts to it. There's the sculpting, the modeling, the retopoing, the UVing, unwrapping, the texturing, the rigging. So many things to do, not to mention optimization. So not only do you need to have the technical skill of this, but you also need to have the artistic skill for it to actually look good. So it's a big undertaking and it's a big challenge. Now, there are benefits to making your own art. If I need a prop, I can just go into Maya, model it, texture it, and I have that prop in the game, within a few hours, hopefully less if it's a simpler one. But, I don't have to go searching through different 3D asset stores, trying to find it, maybe not finding it, and then getting it and it's not quite right. It's going to be not properly optimized. It's quite time consuming to find assets, especially if you need a specific one. If you know how to make them, you can actually just go ahead, make the things you need, put it into the game. It's kind of nice to be able to do that. So my tip for this is, first of all, don't think that 2D is going to be any easier than 3D. They're just two different beasts, but 2D can be just as challenging and just as time consuming. Don't forget, when you're animating 2D, you have to do every single frame of that animation, which can be really hard compared to, with 3D, you have some tools where it moves between things. But what I'm saying is, don't do 2D because you think it's going to be easier. That's not the case. However, you can do a style in either 2D or 3D that will be much simpler than what I'm doing, which would make your life a lot easier. You can also design your game to have fewer assets, or a smaller variety of assets, basically, fewer characters. Basically, what I'm saying is scope it down, because this is a lot of work. This is has been a big time sink for me. And there's things that you can do to mitigate how much time you're going to be spending on that. With that said, if you have a game that you want to make and you're up for the challenge, then do what you need to do. With project management, I'll start with the easy one because that's obvious. I only have to manage myself. I don't have to communicate with other people. I don't have to have meetings. Sometimes I have meetings with myself just to make sure I'm on the same page as myself. But for the most part, that's a really nice benefit, is the project management is very straightforward. Now, there are some downsides to this. The first one is, when you're not working on your game, if you're working on the programming, other parts of it are not getting done. You can't just put down the art, go to the programming. When you come back to that art, it's still there for you to do. That can actually be a huge challenge because you might think like, I'll do that later, or I don't really want to do that. I'll do the thing that's fun, which can be a real problem later in the process when you're getting close to launch. And all the things that you need to do are the things that you want to do the least. So you're now in this place where you're now in a time crunch. You don't want to be doing these tasks, and they're probably challenging tasks. So what I would recommend, especially on that one, is set up like a schedule. And if there's like a task you really don't like doing, try to make yourself do it on a regular basis, so you're not left with all of the less appealing work at the end, and then you're in this like really negative mind space where you're doing stuff you don't like doing for a long period of time. There's many ways to do this, and I recommend doing what works best for you. For me, I do take a break from things if I'm getting really frustrated with it, but I do try to come back once I finish another task somewhere else, because I know that if I leave it for a long period of time, it's still not getting done, and it's best to just go back and tackle that task before I let it go for too long. Another challenge in doing everything yourself is that you are the only one who's looking at the project. There's no one approving things, which means there's no one really giving feedback on things. So I highly recommend, first of all, testing regularly, but even more frequent than that, I recommend checking in with people, connecting with people where you can get feedback, whether that's other game developers and you guys can share your thoughts or your work and give each other feedback. So it's this nice kind of, you guys help each other, whether it's some kind of community where people give feedback on things. I definitely recommend connecting to people so that you can have a second set of eyes on your project along the way. So it's not completely behind a wall until the end and no one's seen it and there's no second feedback and opinion until the very end. That's a dangerous game to play. So if you're making your own game, financing the game is going to be a challenge, for the most likely. I don't know how that would not be a challenge. I'm pretty sure that's going to always be a challenge. And it's going to be different for everybody. Whether you apply for grants or funding, whether you have investors, whether you're self-funded, whatever it is, it's going to be a challenge. For myself, I saved up for a long time before I quit my previous job and went into game development, but I still needed to cushion that with something. And so I've been lucky that my streams have been successful enough that I can work with sponsors and get funding through that. But there is time that goes into that. I spend, time streaming. I spend time improving the stream. And then there's many communications that happen. There's contracts, there's paperwork, there's planning, there's executing sponsored streams and segments. And those things do take time, which take away from the game development time. Or my journey, I started by building up savings for many years before I quit my job to work on my projects. And I have been funding my games along the way through my stream. I've been lucky enough that it's a big enough stream that I can bring on sponsors, and that helps to finance the game. But that does come with, time expenditure as well, setting up those streams, communications. So there's going to be challenges on whatever path you take, I'm sure. Now, the big benefit to this is if you set yourself up right, you have the freedom to do what you want. I think this is obvious and a huge draw to a lot of indies and a lot of solo developers. It means you can experiment with cool new mechanics and game ideas. It means you can share the idea you wanted to make. It's really rewarding, and it's a really nice thing to be able to do. So my recommendation here is to have two separate things. I recommend having like a pool, like a buffer, like something you can dig into if you need to, as well as something that's coming in along the way. Because I think if you only have one or the other, if your income that's coming in along the way is up and down, at least, you're going to want something that you can rely on so you don't get too stressed out if there's a low period. And if you are just taking out of a fund or something like that, that can be really demoralizing because you're watching that slowly go down. So having something to replenish it along the way can really help, whether that's some sort of passive income or a part-time job or some kind of, maybe you're selling your assets that you're making. There's so many ways to do that. I highly recommend setting it up really well in advance and plan for longer periods of time, overshoot rather than undershoot. Marketing your game is always a challenge when you're on a limited budget because you don't have resources to put towards it, both in financing and your time. But it is important to do. It's an important thing to not let it get neglected. A benefit to solo development this is almost like a misconceived benefit. People think that it's going to be impressive that someone's making a game on their own. I actually have found the opposite. And this is why you'll see a lot of solo devs or small indie teams have something to you kind of have to prove yourself, and it sucks that you have to do that. But to have something to kind of prove that you mean business. So, a lot of indie devs will be like, oh, I worked at this company. And that's something to be like, oh, they kind of know what they're doing. For me, my thing that I do is I'm online streaming every day. If you don't think I'm going to stick to this project and be consistent, all I have to do is pull up VODs for every day of the last 3 years and know that there's no way that I'm going to be stopping. There's a track record there, right? My tip on this would be when it comes time to talk about who's making the game, to have something to show, if it's your background or your work ethic or something. And if you don't have that, I recommend having some gameplay that people can either try or at least see videos of, so that they know that you're already far enough along when you start to talk about the team. Okay, so story writing. If your game has a story, you are going to need to learn how to write. Like you need to learn how to do everything else. One thing about writing is that it does take time to research and to brainstorm, and you can get creative block very easily in writing, especially if you're not a experienced writer. I suppose a benefit to writing on a solo project is that you're not going to be butting heads with anyone. You can write the story the way you want to. Now, my tips for writing is to try to work with other people if you can. I know this is meant to be a solo, how am I doing this solo? But I've spent the most, I've hired out the most for writing consulting. I've just been bringing up people up to speed, explaining the story, and just making sure that they poke holes in it and bring up any plot holes I might have missed, or ask me questions. What's the motive for this? Because it's so easy to miss things like that if you don't have a second set of eyes on it. And it's really helpful to get those questions asked before you start integrating into the game, because the last thing you want is to have built a whole game along in a story and then realize that there's like some big problem with the story. That's a major problem. So I recommend getting some eyes on it early on. And if you don't hire, then being part of some writing communities or some game development communities where people like to discuss, the story behind the game. Or if not, have some friends. Just run the story by some friends. Ask your parents, Mom, what do you think of this story? Whatever you need to do to get a second set of eyes on that story early on. All right, voice acting. Challenge to voice acting is that most people have a limited vocal range. You could do all the voices yourself, though it might be kind of a silly game if you do that. Unless, it's written as just one voice. But if you have a different range of voices, doing it on your own could be challenging. There are tools, there's AI voices. I don't know if they're quite there yet. I don't think that they can replace the quality you get from a proper professional voice actor. I don't think there's any benefit to being a solo dev and in the terms of voice acting. I guess you can pick the voice actor that you like best, and there's not going to be any conversation around.